Yes, so my name is Katie. Oh, the mic's there. My name is Katie, and I have been really looking forward to being here. Part of my job is that I get to help students like yourselves to think and explore life's big questions about God, life, and faith. And the Christian Union this week has been putting on a whole mixture of events to give you space to think about the Christian faith. So whether it's your first time or your third time, know that you are really welcome, and I really hope you are enjoying the free lunch. Yeah, so this lunchtime I'm going to be delivering a talk on the question, Unequal world, unjust God. And then after the talk, there'll be an opportunity to ask questions via Slido. So a little bit about me. I currently live in Cardiff, and I've been here for about 3.5 years. And I've just recently graduated from Cardiff University. I enjoy hiking, which obviously Wales is perfect for. I'm a massive foodie. And I also really enjoy watching football, like jump, shout, scream at the TV kind of football. So naturally, I leapt at the chance to watch the latest World Cup in Qatar. And what an interesting tournament full of shocking and amazing moments. Shockingly, we saw some of the world's strongest teams like Portugal, Belgium, and Germany bowing out of the competition early on. We saw excellent football being played from players such as Lionel Messi from Argentina and Kylian Mbappe from France. And sadly, England gave it their all and left the competition at the quarterfinals. To say I was gutted was an understatement. But the game wasn't short of controversies. There were many VAR playbacks, controversial goals, and referee disputes. But one of the biggest controversies was that the tournament was overshadowed by inequality and injustice. We've heard horrendous reports of the treatment of migrant workers building the stadium in Qatar and of the various human rights abuses associated with it. The charity Amnesty International found that migrant workers from other countries had been exploited, they'd been threatened, living in poor living conditions, and been under forced labour. And a report testified to racism and found that more than a third of guards across 5 companies that were interviewed said that the management from their companies treat employees differently depending on their nationality, race, and language. And there were also concerns over the attitudes towards women and their choice of clothing. And sadly, the World Cup is just the tip of the iceberg. There are many types of inequalities in our world. Gender, race, and human rights are just some of them. Our daily news feeds are rampant with other stories and reports of inequality across the globe. You know, recently, Iranian woman Mahsa Amini died in police custody after having been arrested and beaten for wearing her hijab incorrectly. And this sparked unrest over the treatment of women in Iran and the rest of the world. We've seen much injustice since the Ukrainian war, oppression of the Ukrainian people, the appalling treatment of women, and people facing racism as they flee the country. But of course, it's not just in our wider world, it's on our doorstep. It's happening in Southampton too. Between October 2021 and September 2022, there were reports of 15,000 violent and sexual offences in Southampton alone. And as you're probably aware, the Students' Union last year ran the Southampton Says Enough campaign to try and combat this. And during Black History Month at this university, many students shared their experiences of racism. But maybe for you, this is personal. Maybe you've been in a group of friends, and what seemed like a friendly joke was in fact peppered with racist undertones. Or maybe as a woman, you don't feel safe walking through Houndwell Park at night after going to the nightclub Juster's. Or maybe you have missed out on opportunities, not because of your skill set, but because of your race, class, and gender. And maybe for you, you're sat here today, having been invited to this lunch event by your mate or intercepted on the way to a lecture, and you're seeing what's happening in the world around you, and you're asking the questions, how can God be just given how much inequality exists in our world? Or how can there even be a God given the state of everything? And maybe you've been deeply hurt by personal experiences of inequality, and you can't reconcile a good and just God with the atrocities you've gone through. And maybe you're asking, what is God doing about all this injustice? Friends, I understand your thoughts and your feelings. I felt and I do feel the same way, and I ask the same questions. It's heartbreaking and awful that humans should be treated with a lack of respect and dignity. All of us long for justice. We long to see equality reign in our world. And it's shocking to think that people still lack this in a world that is advancing in so many other ways. And so we look to God and we ask, is God the cause of this problem? Is he the one to blame? But I want to ask, what if God isn't the problem? What if God isn't the one to blame? What if the problem is actually with us? Because when we look at all of the inequalities in our world today, sexism, racism, and human rights abuses, to name a few, they don't just happen. They don't just appear out of nowhere. They are problems which have a root cause. Just like weeds in a garden, they don't just spring up out of nowhere. They are caused by a seed which takes root in the ground and causes the weeds to appear. And I want to suggest that the problems in our world are caused by us. Human beings, we are the cause for the inequality we see in the world. Because as human beings, we have personal autonomy. We are responsible for our actions. We can decide whether our words are kind or loving, or whether they are bigoted and hateful. We can decide whether we treat people well or whether we hurt them. And we can decide whether to treat people equally or unequally. God isn't the one who controls our actions. We are. But it actually goes far deeper than just our actions. They are only half of the story. The Christian faith sees that there's a problem at the core of who we are, a problem with the human heart. What do I mean by the human heart? Well, I mean it is the core of our attitudes, desires, and beliefs. And these attitudes, beliefs, and values, they drive our actions, just like the engine of a car is the thing that drives a car forwards. Our hearts are in a bad condition. They are infected with bad attitudes, awful beliefs, and problematic thoughts, and they have the tendency to value the wrong things. And so these bad attitudes and beliefs motivate our behavior, causing us to treat people unequally. Let's take the issue of sexism. Someone's heart may believe that men and women aren't equal and that women aren't fit to do certain jobs. And as a result, these beliefs and attitudes motivate someone to say a sexist comment. Or if we think about human rights abuses in the workplace, those in charge of companies may value generating money more than caring for their workers. And as a result, it causes them to mistreat their workers, minimize their pay in order to generate as much money as possible. Do you see the human heart motivates our behavior? And our hearts are the cause of inequality. Our hearts and actions cause it, not God. But maybe you're sat here thinking, no, actually God is sexist, racist, and doesn't stand up for human rights. Because maybe you've seen and experienced Christians who claim to follow God, actively perpetuating and contributing to inequality, and even using the Bible as their reason for doing so. And so if they're like that, then God must be too. I hear you loud and clear, and I understand your frustrations and your anger. I'm frustrated and I'm angry too. In recent times, we have heard of the appalling sexual abuse scandals being committed by church leaders. We have heard about racism across the church and xenophobic attitudes from leaders claiming to be Christians. And it's awful and it's hypocritical that Christians who are supposed to love their neighbour then go and treat them awfully. And I just really want to apologise sincerely on behalf of that. There are no words to describe the pain that has been caused by Christians and the wider church. And it makes me angry and upset that people who claim to follow God are committing these atrocities. But I want to say, God is not like us. He is not like that. I want to say that if we judge Christianity by the Christians, we conclude that God is unjust. But if we judge Christianity by Jesus, we will find that God is a God of justice and equality. Because Jesus is very different from us. His actions promote equality And his heart, unlike ours, is in a perfect condition, full of moral attitudes, strong beliefs that dignify people, and thinks highly of others, and it values the right things. Jesus believes in a high standard for how we are to treat one another, and he believes in equality. Because when Jesus arrived on the scene 2,000 years ago, his treatment of people was revolutionary. Many people gravitated towards him because his attitudes and beliefs were so unique and countercultural. And we are still feeling the effects of his teaching today. But I want to draw your attention to a particular encounter Jesus has with a woman. And this is from the Gospel of John, which is this book on your table. It should be like a little blue book, chapter 4. John was someone who followed Jesus around and recorded his experiences of seeing Jesus act and be with other people in this book. And this comes from page 11 of this little book. But cast your minds with me to 27 AD. It's midday. It's hot. Jesus arrives in a town called Samaria, and tired from his journey, he sits down at a well. He meets a woman who is on her daily commute to fetch water. It's just the two of them. And what starts off as a simple request for some water from Jesus launches into a profound conversation about theology and about the woman herself. Jesus and this woman, who is unnamed in the story, exchange thoughts about God. And Jesus shows concern and care for the woman's life and faith. And from our eyes, this may seem like an ordinary conversation. However, this conversation is profound, because if you think our culture is bad, the Roman one was even worse. In that time, women were second-class citizens. They hardly had any legal rights, and they were treated like property. And men and women couldn't chat together in public, and people thought that women couldn't understand, guess this, theology and religion, as they were complex topics. Yet, here is Jesus bulldozing through the cultural sexism of the day. He treats this woman as his equal, which he demonstrates in his theological conversation. He treats her as a person instead of a commodity, and he doesn't take advantage of her, which others no doubt did. Instead, he showed love and care for her. But not only was Jesus' treatment of women revolutionary, what was also significant was that she was a Samaritan, and Samaritans were of mixed race. They were part Jewish and non-Jewish. And in short, they were hated by the Jews, to the point where many Jews chose not to travel through Samaria and actually go around the area to avoid them. But Jesus didn't. He went through Samaria. And Jesus met her and treated her with inherent worth and value, and there was no trace of racism on his lips. And the thing is, Jesus wasn't just not racist, he was anti-racist. His belief turned into a physical action. He asks her for a drink, which the woman is shocked at, because at that time, Samaritans were seen as dirty, and it was believed that if a Jew and a Samaritan shared the same drink, the Jew would become unclean. And so what does Jesus do? He asked her for her drink. And what was even worse at that time was that the religious leaders who were supposed to uphold justice instead perpetuated and endorsed it. They denied basic human rights. And these leaders were not just involved in the spiritual aspect of people's lives, but in the civil matters too. But Jesus, he was countercultural. He broke through the sexist, racist, and human rights barriers of his day. God is so different from us. And Jesus isn't just the model of how we are to treat one another. He's the solution to the problem that we find in ourselves. As I've mentioned, we are the cause of inequality, and our hearts cause us to act unjustly. But God wants to transform us. He wants to give us a new heart with better attitudes, beliefs, and thoughts about the world around us. He wants to give us his heart. And as a result, this will change the way that we act, and actually we will act in a more equal and just way. But before we can actually get a new heart, he has to deal with our old one first. And God doesn't let us get away with our bad attitudes, beliefs, and thoughts. There's a price, a cost we have to pay for our injustice. And that cost is our lives, which may seem extreme, But God can't stand injustice of any form, whether action or attitude. It's all wrong to him and deserves the taking of our lives. Otherwise, if we are to get away with it, he wouldn't be a God of justice. But here's the good news. Instead of us paying that cost, God in his great love and kindness sends Jesus to pay it for us. He dies the death we should have died on the cross. He takes our place, so we are free to go, no longer any injustice to our name. We are forgiven. And then he comes back to life, offering us a new heart to replace the old one. And as a result, if we accept this new heart, this will over time motivate us to act more justly and to uphold the rights of others. And this new heart, this transformation is on offer for everyone today. We can be part of the solution of trying to see a more equal world. And if this is you, I would love to encourage you to chat to a member of the CE or someone that you invited today about receiving this new heart. But if you're kind of unsure or are interested to find out more about this God, then I would love to encourage you to look into the Christian faith and into this God of justice. And you can explore more of Jesus' response to inequality by reading the accounts of John and others, which are on the table in front of you. And they are a collection of first-hand experiences from those who saw and witnessed Jesus themselves.
Katie, thank you so much for talking again. One question is about, is all suffering caused by the 7 vices?
So yeah, I haven't personally heard of what the 7 vices is. So I'd love to, if you've sent that question in, come and chat to me at the end. And tell me what you kind of mean by the 7 vices. I'm also happy to go away and research that and to give you an answer. And if you give me your contact details, I can do a bit of researching and thinking and then give you that answer. Because at the moment, I feel like I'd like to better understand that before answering it. So, yeah.
If you said Christians and Christianity have caused a lot of pain, so if Christianity as an institution is flawed, is Jesus not responsible for that? And his disciples were not as open-minded. Why didn't he choose better disciples?
Yeah, I think I'd love to ask the question, what do you kind of mean by Christianity as an institution? Because if you think about it, I guess, as rules, regulations, or as kind of the people that follow Jesus, then, as I kind of said, if we judge Christianity by kind of the Christians, we're going to find out that it's unjust. But if Christianity is about the person of Jesus, then we're going to find that, as I said, that God is actually a God of justice. And I think it kind of comes back to the fact that God gives us a choice. We have personal autonomy. When God, created us and made us, we weren't made to be robots. He gave us a choice whether we act justly or unjustly. And otherwise, it wouldn't be very living to not give anybody a choice. Imagine if kind of your parents kind of forced you to do everything that they wanted you to do, but they didn't give you a choice to kind of, with instruction, to work out the world around you and to make those mistakes and things. It wouldn't be very, very loving. And so, is Jesus kind of responsible for the way that we are? I don't think so, because God gives us that choice, and actually that's the most living thing to do. If we look at the disciples in the Bible, they mucked up, they weren't open-minded, but Jesus was interested in transforming them, like I said in my talk. It says here, why didn't he choose better? I mean, is there anyone better? Because all of us are flawed, all of us act unjustly and have kind of corrupted hearts. And so actually God is in the business of kind of transforming us and making us more like him. So I'd say to that question.
Thank you, that's really helpful. You said that we deserve punishment and that the price of that is our lives, but that also God forgives us, and surely that means he isn't just. Surely he isn't just if he doesn't hold us accountable.
Yeah, that's a great question. So as I mentioned in my talk, The price of what the Bible would call our injustice, sin, is death. There is a punishment for that cost of that sin. And actually, we should naturally die, just like if someone commits a crime in a courtroom, there's a price to pay, whether that's a kind of a financial sum or imprisonment or something else. And that person is forgiven and free to go once they've paid that price. And so technically, that's what we deserve. But this is where it gets interesting. God is so kind and full of what Christians would call grace, which is kind of undeserving favor, that actually he gives us Jesus to take the punishment for our sins instead of us. When we should have rightfully taken that place on the cross and been separated from him forever because of our unjust actions, Jesus steps in and he's like, no, I'll take that for you, which is mind-blowing because it doesn't seem right. But yeah, God's justice is still fulfilled because someone is still paying the price for our debt, for our injustice. And so God is still just because, in a courtroom, if someone kind of walks in and someone commits a crime and they have to pay £10,000, if someone pays that fine for them, that person's legally free to go, and justice is still upheld. And so similarly, Jesus kind of pays that price for us. And so God can still remain just, but also loving and kind at the same time.